Jacob. Hang on, let me get my mic set up right.
How many engineers does
All
it
right.
take to set up the mics?
All right, I'm gonna get comfortable here. Hang on here. All right.
I'm so excited for this. As Christy said, you know, right out the gate, immediately, it was no question to me who I wanted to speak with, and it was you. I think as engineers and producers, at least for me, I follow other engineers and producers, and they're kind of my superheroes, more than the bands. I hate to say that, but so I've been watching your work for a really long time. So to be able to get to do this is kind of mind blown. First question. Let me ask you this. At what point and where did it begin? At what point did you know you wanted to be in control rooms?
I discovered that when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and that would have been in the 70s, when all I had at my disposal, because I didn't come from a musical family or a musical town, Joliet, Illinois was not a hub for music, but of course there were albums, and you looked inside the albums and you saw, if you were lucky, they would put in pictures of the band recording, and you'd see pictures like Beatles records and stuff of people in control rooms. And for me, I didn't realize this until some hindsight. My dad worked in a control room, but that control room was for the gas pipelines of Midwestern Gas. And he raised me, and so he was a dispatcher when he started, and he would work midnight shift. And so I would get to go to Midwestern Gas with him, and the control room was underground because if the pipes blew, all the engineers would die. And so yet it was this room, it was enclosed, it was safe. It had a big console, but the console was a board up on the wall that was all these little lights that lit up the whole pipeline as it came down from Alaska. But they called it the console. And there were meters all over the place, what looked like VO meters. They were measuring gas pressure and whatnot. So in that control room was a safe place for me. It was, again, I felt safe. I was with my dad. It was a controlled environment. And I think that in my child mind, when I saw the valves and the meters in the pictures of the recordings, you know, the album sleeves, I think it joined. And my dad did love music, and so I also spent a great deal of time in headphones listening to albums. And one of my very first memories was that during a moment of trauma in my childhood, I came to understand that if I put the needle on the record and the song played and it got to my favorite part, because there's always a favorite part, a part I just couldn't wait to hear again, that all I had to do was lift the needle and put it back. And the one thing in my life that I knew was certain was that my favorite part would play again. And so we're fighting and people drinking and shit going on that was just not cool. I could put those headphones on and I could count on the song and the favorite part, and I had control. So I have the control room with my dad. I have the albums and the pictures. I have this notion of what's going on in my ears and trying to understand, why is this here while this is here and this is here and this is here? So I would get pieces of paper and draw out these arcs of sound that, of course, now I know is the panning scheme for a song. But I had no idea. I mean, and I was listening to records like Tubular Bells and Jesus Christ Superstar soundtrack and, you know, Mother and Child Reunion. Like, so I was really transfixed by how things got placed where they were. And so, again, all these things, not growing up in a music family that would say, hey, we're going into the studio with Uncle so-and-so. I didn't really know what a studio was, but I did have these elements deeply embedded so that by the time I was like a teenager, I knew that I had to find my way to a studio. And I still didn't really know what the engineer did, except that, oddly, that was what I was going to do. I was going to be an engineer that recorded music, and that was my plan. There were no colleges then, there were no schools, so I had to graduate from high school and embark on my journey with just this kind of piecemeal idea of what it was going to mean to be the person in that control room recording so that I could decide where things were going to be placed in my headphones, which I still do, and I think a lot about.
So you come out of high school and immediately start looking into studios. Are you looking for an internship? Or are you looking for?
No, I was looking to survive. I came out of high school, moved away from my hometown on my 18th birthday at the point when they couldn't send police to bring me home. I wasn't a bad person, but I had a troubled teenage years, and I moved up to Chicago and, got a job in a temp pool and was assigned to an ad agency. But all the while, I knew that I had to get to a studio. Now, oddly, it never occurred to me to look around Chicago. I thought I must go to Los Angeles. I must go to a building that was essentially Capitol Records. I had to go to the building that was round, that had the spire, that if I was going to find a studio, I didn't have the, and again, this was the late 70s, early 80s. There was no internet, like there was no way to kind of Google where I was going to go. I had to just think, well, I guess Chicago. It never, like Chess Records, none of that was in my mind. I just thought I have to go to Los Angeles, obviously. And so I did a thing called they don't do this anymore, but people wanted their cars transported. So if you had a driver's license and not a criminal record, you were hired to transport their car. Now, you didn't get paid to transport the car, but you got a gas stipend and you drove that person's car and that's exactly what I did. Drove to Los Angeles, marched to Capitol Records, and said at the studio, which is of course a different business, and I didn't know that then, walked in the front entrance, and I was like, I would like to get a job in the recording studio if that's at all possible. And they said, it's not. And not only that, but you're not going to get a job anywhere here because you need to leave the building. No, but then I actually called and got a position as a temp in their temp pool and was hired by the distribution company, which was called Sciba at the time, Capital EMI Manhattan Angel, and was an excellent typist. I typed over 100 words a minute. And I also knew how to work, early word processors, DOS. And so then I worked my way up, ultimately over 3 years, to become an alternative marketing manager. Now then, there was no such thing as, like, alternative music. There was no Americana. There was simply AOR, CHR, and R&B. That was the musical genres available. Album-oriented rock, contemporary hit radio, and rhythm and blues. And then, blues, but so they started this new thing called alternative, and it had bands like Crowded House and Skinny Puppy and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and these bands, and they were all just coming up, and I managed to get moved into as the alternative marketing manager. And it was fun, but I used to go down to the studio all the time, and I was like, I really just want to work in the studio. And they said, no, we don't hire women in the studio. I mean, to me, that wasn't a sexist or a discriminatory aspect to me, because that was the world that I lived in. Of course they don't hire women in the studio. There are no women in the studio. They went so far as to say that would be a distraction. Now, mind you, I'm almost 60 years old. I look better now than I did then. I was whoa, this beautiful woman will distract people so much that they will not be able to record. I had pimples, I was thin, I was poor, I was not well, I was so desperately average. So, but that was the lay of the land, and I kept going down to the studio until I was finally told that I was not allowed to come into the hall that led to the studio anymore, that I needed to stay on the floor where I worked. And because, again, you didn't get to go to any floor you wanted, even if you worked in that tower. It wasn't like, hey, I think I'll go hang out in A&R on the 11th floor. I was on Sciba, I was on distribution, then I was on marketing, and that was the 10th floor, and you stayed on your floor. And then I got upset that I couldn't get a job in a studio, and I had it. Am I talking too long?
No.
Should I shorten it up?
No.
There was a guy, he became a friend of mine, and he was an assistant engineer on the Megadeth Wake Up Dead record, right? And they were signed to Capitol, and I was like, okay, I'm not a big metal fan, and he asked me if I wanted to go to what was actually, I think it was Ocean Way, it might have been Sunset Sound, I don't remember. Do I want to come by the session? And I was like, yes. So I got to go in when Megadeth was recording, and I got into the control room and I saw the guy at the autolocator, autolocator position, which was a position that some people know, but many people don't anymore. There's a one way that you sit in an autolocator. There's not 20, there's not 10. There's exactly one position where you can actually control the autolocator. And I saw his hands punch in and out, and I thought, I am going to be that person. And it wasn't going to happen in Los Angeles. I was told that by Susan Rogers, who I revere. I met her at one point, and I told her I wanted to be an engineer, and she was a woman, and I was stunned. And she told me it'll never happen. This actually happened after I got back from LA, so I kind of skipped a part. After I got back from England, I mean. Should I fill the England thing in?
Yeah.
Okay, carry on. So I quit Capitol Records. I sold everything that I owned, which was not much, and I flew to London, where I knew nobody, and had no reason to be there, but I kept thinking, I don't know what I thought at the time, something in my mind. I'm not a mystical person, but I'm mystical enough to know that if my mind says you're going to London, off I went to London. And I moved to London, lived in a cold water flat, was working at a pub called the Portobello Gold. And Tarquin Gotch, who was a big deal manager at Capitol, he managed XTC and all these other bands that were very big then, and an artist named Hugh Harris, who was also on Capitol. And he walked into the pub, and I won't do the fake British accent, and said, "What are you doing here? Don't you work at Capitol Records in the marketing department?" And I said, "I quit. I don't want to do that. I want to be an engineer." And he said, "Well, I can't help you with that. But my manager for my office is going on maternity leave for 6 months, and I need someone to manage my office. And I'll give you £2,000, and you can live in my flat. Because I'm going to America to produce the music for a film, which was Home Alone." I know. But I didn't, at the time I didn't know that. All I knew was he managed Hugh, who I loved. I loved Hugh's music, and I loved his record. And I'd get to live in his flat, and therefore not be in a cold water flat with a bunch of Australians, and and working at a pub. So I was a good office manager. I'm still a good office manager. I love spreadsheets, even though they didn't really exist then. So I moved up to Tarquin's flat. He split. I started running the office. I started running it very well. And then one day, up from the basement comes this beautiful Hugh Harris, who was this English Jamaican dude. And he's like, "Oh, hello, love. You're the woman from Capitol." I guess he remembered who I was. And he had a studio in the basement. It was early digital performer, but he also had a Tascam 1-inch and a little Tascam console. And I knew they were down there recording. And I'm upstairs on the 3rd floor on the office, and I'm living on the 4th floor in the flat up there. And he's in the basement, and they're making music. So I finally was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I went down, knocked on the door, opened it. What? And I was like, I want to be an engineer, and I want you to let me in here. And I don't want to have sex with you. No offense. You're lovely. But that's not why I'm here. And I don't want you guys to freak me out. I don't want you to scare me. I don't want you to hurt me. I don't want you to do anything to me. I want to learn how to record, and I will clean up for you, and I will run for you. And it wasn't that I was opposed to sex. It wasn't that. I wanted them to see that I wanted this so bad. And I was just, again, I was skinny, I was pimply, I was awkward, but I was smart. And I had balls, apparently. And so he was like, "All right, love, come on in." And the next thing I know, I'm sitting there, and he's like, "Well, put the faders up. Let's have a mix then." And he just gave me the wheel. And he's like, "I'm going to do a vocal, and you're not going to punch my breath. Don't punch my breath. You punch right after the consonant or right before the consonant. Don't punch in the middle of my breath." So right away, he's like, "Over the valley." And I'm like, boom. And he's teaching me how to punch in. And he's the one who said, "Oh, love, it's all just level. Put your book away." Because I had some, book, the basics of, it was actually called the Audio Cyclopedia. I actually dragged that. And if anybody old people here will remember that book, I dragged it with me. It's this big thing. It's called the Audio Cyclopedia. I still have it. And he's like, "No, that matters. It's all just level, the meters, the faders, the knobs." So in that smoky, pot-filled basement with a bunch of English Jamaicans and one white guy named Sam, who was awesome too, I started learning how to record. really record. And I was left unmolested. I was left unabused. I was treated with utter respect by those men in that room. And then Hugh went on tour with Sinead O'Connor for her big hit record, for the Nothing Compares to You record. And I went back to Los Angeles, and that's when I ran into Susan Rogers, because she was going to cut Hugh's next record at Sunset Sound. Met up again with Hugh. He got off the road, and I went to the studio, and Susan Rogers, I said, I want to be an engineer. Hugh's been teaching me, kind of thing. And she said, well, you need to leave this town because it will never happen for you here. I came up through Studer as a Studer tech. There's too much competition here. There are no other women to help. There's nobody will help you here. You will not make it here. You need to leave and go find somewhere else and get into some studio where you have a chance. And a week and a half later, Hugh was going on the road again. So I moved to New Orleans, and I got on the city bus, and I went to every studio in New Orleans, C-Saint, Ultrasonic, were the actually only two that were there at the time. I didn't know about Kingsway at the time because that was private. And they both hired me to be a maid. But C-Saint cut me loose right away because they didn't actually want to pay me anything. They just wanted me to do it for free, and I had to find a way to live. I mean, remember, I had nothing. I had no family support. I had no money. I had no significant, I had nothing. I had me and $357. So Ultrasonic said they'd pay me $200 a week, which for me might as well, it could have been $2 million. And I could clean, and I started cleaning. And then I started cleaning a few other studios, this place called South Lakeside in Metairie. I took the bus to these places, and that was it. The rest, it really is history, until I rolled into Kingsway as a maid.
So you go into Kingsway as a maid, having any idea of what was going on at Kingsway?
Yes, what really happened was I was cleaning. I was literally mopping the tracking room floor in Ultrasonic when Malcolm Byrne, who was working on the Chris Whitley record, brought over a DAT. These were brand new things that don't exist anymore, but they were little digital tapes. And because Ultrasonic had an early mastering suite called Sadie, that was a very early digital mastering thing. And they wanted something done to one of the mixes that they had for the Chris record. So Malcolm came there with the DAT and looked out into the main tracking room and saw me mopping. And of course, you know, he taught me so much, but he was being a little creepy, you know, like Prince of Darkness with the like flowy Anne Rice looking clothes or whatever. And he's like, make her bring the DAT over to Kingsway when it's done. You know, and the guys at the studio were like literally doing like, you know, like stupid stuff. And I was like, whatever, you guys, shut up. And so he gave me the DAT when it was done, and I got on the bus and took the bus downtown and went to Kingsway. Knocked on the door, you know, creaked open into this mansion, and, you know, it's huge, and I've got the DAT in my hand, and there's like the Lanois people and Malcolm, and they're all flowy, and they're literally dressing like Interview with the Vampire vibe. And I'm walking up, and I'm hearing, but what I'm hearing is some man singing, "They hold me here much longer." Chris Whitley singing Phone Call from Leavenworth live. And if you don't know that record, get it. He died in 2005, and it was very sad. So one of the first people I actually walked in and saw was that woman right there, Karen Brady, my dear friend who managed Kingsway for years. Holler out to Karen. She was there. And immediately she looked at me like, ooh, who are you? And I looked at her like, save me. And so I walked up there and I delivered the DAT. And I saw these Lockwood cabinets, which I know now are Lockwood cabinets. I didn't know that then. With Tannoy Gold speakers, I didn't know that then. And this magnificent studio with this magnificent music in a mansion. And I thought, I will clean here. I will work here. I will do anything to be here. And I did. I really got hired. Do you want to know the real reason?
Yeah.
Because that was when I came back to do something else. And I had met Mark Howard, who was an engineer then, and we dated lightly, but it was stupid. But anyway, they had a Lynx timeline. And again, this is not something a lot of you guys will ever have to cross paths with, thank God, because it was horrifying. A Lynx timeline that was locking two analog machines together, and Mark couldn't get it into lock. And I was looking across the room thinking, he's not loading the second machine right. He's not loading the Fostex right. And that's what's failing. And Dan was in the room, and it was really scary. And I just finally walked over and I was like, the problem is you're not loading the Fostex into the, you know, the second machine side, which at the time we used to call master and slave side, which was weird. But anyway, you're not loading the slave machine right. And then Dan looked at me and was like, who the fuck are you? And I was like, I'm just letting him know I've been making cables upstairs in your, you know, tech room for a couple months now, actually, sir. And and he's like, then you lock him. And so I walked over and I locked him. And then he said, I want you in this room all the time. You keep those machines in lock, and that is your job.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that was, I kept those machines in lock. And I locked him up over and over again for that next year. And then he started having me cut tape because I know how to cut tape.
Yeah.
And I had taught myself how to cut tape. Because I would go in there afterwards, at whether it was ultrasonic or wherever else I was, and I would practice cutting tape. You know, I would put whatever song there, and I would re-edit the Rolling Stones, Give Me Shelter, and say, well, look, I'm just going to redo the end of this thing now that it needed it. And I taught myself to cut tape. I taught myself all of it. And that's how I got started. And the rest really does end up being known history. Mm-hmm. I was there for all that stuff. And I didn't know anything. And they'd kick the auto-locator at me because they'd get up and go play. You see, Malcolm played. And he'd be producing, but then he'd want to go and play, or Dan would want to go and play. So then they would shove it at me, literally, and I'd have to, and I would think of Hugh, and I'd think, don't punch the breath, don't punch the breath, you know, and don't miss the punch, because these guys might actually hit me. They might kick me or something. And again, I didn't think any of that would be wrong. I'd had people aggress on me my whole life. So I was ready. And by the way, there was no sexual harassment of me, really, because I would fight. I mean, if somebody was coming after me, it would be just like, I will kick you, we will get in a fight, you will hurt me, and then I'll call the police, and there will be a police record, and I'll get fired. Of course, I know that, but then I'll go somewhere else. But I didn't have young children to support. I didn't have anybody counting on me, so I could do that. I could fight you. If I needed to fight you, I would fight you. And once they knew that about you, they were a little scared. So then they're like, well, don't mess with her because she might hit or bite or spit. So, and I was always ready, you know, like, ugh. You know, Mark once scooted a clipboard because my job was that I had to keep my eye on Dan or Malcolm 100% of the time. I was not allowed to look away from them because they weren't going to speak to me. They were just going to give me hand signals. And there was a set of hand signals I had to know. Stop, rewind. You know, I just had to watch their hands. So if I looked away, even to like look at a meter that importantly might need my attention, but then I wasn't looking when there was being a command, then that wasn't good. So Mark somehow got my hand must have been rested on the clipboard. He said, bam, right onto my finger. So there was some physical abuse like that. I got him back. Don't worry. I got him back really, really good. But we were like a bunch of like weird kids that fights would break out and stuff. So I learned to hold my own in a crucible of extreme pressure. I told this story in the control room a little bit ago, but Dan told me, of course, when you walk through the control room, you need to go behind the console over the tape machines, and you have to duck down, because if I look at you, you reduce my creative energy by 10%. And if I speak to you, it's by 30%. Now, you could see that as being incredibly abusive or mean or whatever. But what he was trying to impart to me, he just didn't have the correct language, was that your presence is strong in this room. You are not a nobody in this room. You in particular, Trina Shoemaker, are not an invisible presence. You have a presence. And because of that, you draw attention to yourself, even when you don't mean to. You just have that. You walk into a room and you can own the room. Therefore, you need to dim down because you cannot distract in this room. And it was not your beauty. It's nothing like that. It's a presence that I just happen to have. I didn't know that then. He didn't have the language to tell me that in a way. So he told it in the best language he had. Duck down because you distract me and you distract these members of the band. In a way that is not good for the moment. But I would duck down and I would get over to the tape machine, and then he would elevate me back up after several takes happened, he would then not ask anybody else in the room. He'd say, Trina, what's the take? And I'd say 5 to me was the best take, Dan, but I'd take the bridge from 3, and you might want to look at verse to, and I'd had it all mapped out because I didn't sit back there. I didn't have a phone to be Googling. I mean, I took numbers and I took notes and I had notebooks full preparing. What if I get asked? So I'd be ready. And I was ready. And then that would be the take. And I'd cut it together for them. And then there'd be a moment of, woo, you know, great. And everybody'd be so happy. After one of those moments of me having my head filled with praise, I was then told to go get coffee. This was during Iggy Pop's record. And I was really high on myself. And I had to walk down the street to go get coffees. And I wasn't looking where I was going. And I was thinking about, oh man, when they played the edit and everybody was like, shit, that's amazing. And then I looked up and saw a man coming for me. And then I looked to the side and saw another one. Then I looked behind me and saw the third one. And I got jumped on the street right then in New Orleans. So always there was this in my life, in my experience, there was these great moments of moments where I felt that my greatness had been recognized. It was often followed by something that would throw me under a bus, whether it was a mugging or something else. So I was always on what has played out till this very moment of my life, highs that were followed by extreme lows, often happening in the studio, humiliations, things that should have probably been credited to me that never were, things that had they been properly financially spread correctly, I would not have to work so hard now to just think about, am I going to get my kid through college and then have any money for retirement? Am I ever going to be able to retire? No. I mean, in other words, it's been a long road and a beautiful journey, and I'm good at what I do and I love what I do. But there has never been a moment of financial security. There's never been a moment of ego security, and that keeps me hungry and keeps every moment in the studio for me still a moment that I think, I'm so grateful that I still get the chance to do this. I never taken a single moment for granted, nor will I ever, because I can't. Because it is that rare and sacred and beautiful to me that I'm still allowed to go into studios and go into by that console in there that Jacob built. The console Jacob built is like the Jacob's ladder of consoles. It goes straight to heaven, half API and half Neve joined. It's a chimera of consoles. It's really joined, and it's deep and intense, and I can't wait to record on it. That's where we are. Yay for the console. All right. Let's move this ship forward.
So, early '90s, you're at Kingsway. You're starting to do a lot of different records. I'm going to jump just a little bit. 1996.
1996.
1996.
Rolling her back.
Sheryl Crow comes to Kingsway.
Yeah.
The record is the second record
Yes.
for Sheryl.
Yeah.
The first record's done pretty well. She comes in to do the second record. You're the house engineer at Kingsway. No.
Actually, Emmylou Harris's record, Wrecking Ball, was the last record I made as the house engineer.
Ah, okay.
I had a falling out with Dan during that record, a rather major one, and I quit during Emmy's record, and Emmy called me and said, you have to come back. Neil Young's coming in tomorrow to record backing vocals, and this is your setup. You have to come back. And I said that I would come back, but I told Dan this is the last record that I'm going to do here at Kingsway. I need to go independent because otherwise I'm never going to find out if I have any wings at all. I will always just be in your shadow, in the shadow of the greatness of all the things that you do and have done, but I need to find out if I've got any skin in this game for real. That's not your skin. I need my own thing. And I came back and finished Emmy's record, but that was it. So then we had an assistant, because Dan wouldn't hire an assistant for me to train so that I could start to do independent work. And that crashed, and then Sheryl came in a few months later, and it crashed and burned with that assistant, and a lot of gear wasn't working. And she had a fight with her producer, Bill Bottrell, and he walked out. So Scooter, I have a shooter and a scooter. So Scooter talked to Karen, who was still managing the studio at that time, and said, well, you know, what the hell are we going to do? And Karen said, well, Trina Shoemaker doesn't work here anymore, but she may come in to finish getting the setup done for this record on this day one that Sheryl Crow's here. And, but you'll have to pay her separate. So they called me and I said, in my mind, the last thing I want to do is expose myself to another pissed off rock star who is unhappy that they're a millionaire rock star or big producer that is so miserable about their massive fame that I get to go and be yelled at a whole bunch. But I also needed money, so I was like, yeah, I'll come in for one day, and they got to pay me $100. I want cash. I want $100 a day. $100, not $40 a day. I want $100 a day. So I showed up, and Sheryl was angry and in a very bad mood and very angry that her producer had left. And I don't blame her. I mean, she was scared. Mm-hmm. You know, Bill left, and she's in this haunted mansion where the gear doesn't work for angry people, but that gear works for me because I know how to talk to the gear. I'm a gear whisperer. So, you know, her musicians are kind of showing up, and they're all kind of, you know, talking and playing. And, you know, I'm starting to do a dance like how I was trained by Dan. Get that setup going. You don't talk to the artist. The artist doesn't need to talk to you. They don't, and I don't want to talk to them. I don't even care about them. I care about the song. And I care about the sounds. Truly, I mean, I love the artists because I need them because they got to make the song. But once they're done, I want them to go away so that I can just work on the song. So I'm setting mics up. I'm like booming things in really slowly and running around and back, not being seen, not being heard. And, you know, and I've already got multi-track rolling because you always rolled tape no matter what. So I got tape rolling. I got the run dat going. And Sheryl looks over her shoulder. I hope you're running a dat. We're writing over here. You know, and so I was like, you know, running and running. And by that time, they're writing a song called Home. I should have put that on the list. And I'm in record. And I'm booming mics in, you know, as we're going. You know, she's on like she didn't even have a mic, and all of a sudden, you know, this 47 rolls and do. And so this is all true. Karen was there. Karen saw this happen. So, and then Sheryl turns to me. She's like, well, I need you to roll back on the DAT. We want to listen to that. I was like, well, it'll be easier. I got all the numbers. I'll just roll it off the tape. And she's like, nobody told you to roll tape. And that's when I thought, okay, here we are. Right now is going to be where she and I decide if we're going to play, if we're going to make music, or if I'm walking out of here right now, because I am not going to be treated badly again. And I said, that's all I have to do over here is roll tape. That's my job. If you don't want to pay for the reels that I've burned through, fine, I will. But I roll tape. That's what I do. Fine, roll it off the tape. So, of course, I roll it off the multi, and it sounds great. It's home. It's what you hear. Just go get the record and listen to Home. The reason it fades in is because they then listen to it. They're like, wow, that sounds great. Awesome. Let's try to cut it now. You know, we've got a song form here. Now we're going to go out and we're going to try to, actually cut takes of it. So they do. But nothing is as magic as that writing take that they did when they were actually creating that song. But it didn't have a bridge. So, of course, they did have to go out and cut some takes because then they wrote a bridge. And they're like, what are we going to do now? This is Sheryl. What are we going to do now? The bridge is in this take, but nothing, whatever. And I was like, I can cut that bridge in. We'll just cut the bridge in. And we'll have to fix, some stuff. We'll have to overdub, and then I'll have to bounce that or whatever. But I had those skills because of Dan and Malcolm and Mark, to go and cut that bridge in. If you listen close in headphones, you'll really hear these edits very clearly. Cut in the bridge, fix some stuff up, and then, of course, it never had a start because it just had this long 20-minute roll. It was actually 15 minutes of, it was a whole roll of Home. So we just decided to fade it in. And it was after that, this is before we cut, If It Makes You Happy and Maybe Angels and all that. And she's like, well, I guess you can stay the week because my engineer Blair can't get out here for a week. So you can stay for a week while we work. But during that week, we cut the rest of, the big songs for the record. And then she took all the tapes, and nobody asked me to make safeties. But of course, I made safeties. Now, there were safeties on ADATs, but they were safeties nonetheless because that's how we were safety. Because ADATs then were like, woo, ADATs, this is awesome. So I ran safeties onto ADATs and then shipped all the tapes out. We would go in the office and box up the tapes. It was always a really big deal because tapes are heavy. 22 pounds for 2 tapes, 2 rolls of Ampacks in a box. It was exactly 22 pounds. And whether it's recorded on or not, the leader tape doesn't add any weight. And shipped them all out. She got it out there. Her engineer proceeded to immediately punch some big hole in one of the tracks. And they panicked. And so Scooter called me and he's like, "Oh, Jesus, can you send the run dats out? We're going to have to try to, take the run dats," because we were always running dats during the entire sessions, and we'll put that on all, whatever. It was just ridiculous. I was like, well, I got safeties of all the multis. I'll just send you the safeties and you can transfer them to 24 track and then cut in the part that he just punched a hole in. And that turned into me packing up the safeties and getting on the Delta Dash, which used to be this flight out of New Orleans to Los Angeles or New York at night. And I flew the tapes out and I didn't come back for months. And we cut the rest of that record, and that's it. That was the start of my career.
Yeah.
And that's it. And just so that you do know the truths of these things, because I'm here to tell truths too. For that entire record, Sheryl Crow, which made a lot of people millionaires, I got paid a total of $5,800. And I worked on that record for almost a year because I was getting $100 a day, and so at the time it didn't matter because it was a break for me. It meant I had to step up. And it never occurred to me to think, well, there's some disparities here. I'm working, 14, 15 hours a day for that $100. It never occurred to me. I didn't have a manager to say, I want $200 a day, and there was no producer. It was just Sheryl. It was just Sheryl and me. So I never got too big in my britches. I just worked. Now, all these years later, I'm like, damn, somebody could have thrown me a bone. Somebody could have dropped me $100K. It would have changed the course of my life. But that never happened. And it didn't happen on the next record either, or the next one either, or many more records. So I carved my career out of granite, and I still do. And I am proud of my middle-class living. I am proud that I can make my mortgage and I can get my son through college. And that's as best as it got for me. And that's not me being sour grapes or bitter or any of that bullshit. It is not. It is me being a 60-year-old woman who still does this for a living and never had to do shitty things or do anything that I didn't believe in. And I believe in my sounds, and I deliver great mixes, and I do what I say that I'm going to do, and I don't work on stuff I don't want to work on.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you. And if y'all need anything mixed, I charge $130 an hour. No, seriously. No, this I really do. I charge $130 an hour. I mix alone at my home. Artists can't be there. I have to mix alone because it's where it happens, is in my brain. And I keep very, very clear log sheets, and I manage myself, and I'm available. And that's how it works. You contact me through my contact page. All right, there we go.
Moving along a little bit, I want to talk about Queens of the Stone Age.
All right.
I think one of the best signs of like the best engineers, the best producers can move between genres, can move between bands effortless. It's one thing to make country records, it's another thing to make rock records, hip hop, but can you weave? One of the things I admire most about your career is how you've had success in so many different genres, so to say. Sheryl, obviously, huge records, lots of awards, lots of big hits. And then all of a sudden, 2002, Queens of Stone Age.
Right.
Rated R.
There's a whole arc. Jacob and I kind of discussed this when we were trying to lay out how this thing could flow. So you posed weaving through different genres. And Jacob asked me earlier if I have a set of protocols that I use from this genre to that genre. And I absolutely do not, whether it's mixing, tracking, producing, whatever. There's only one protocol that I have, which is my job, is to capture the sound that is before me in the simplest way possible, unmolested. It's not for me to say, I'm going to take that sound and immediately do something to it. My job is to get it to tape or whatever, to the recording medium, and get out of the way. Because it's going through me anyway, but it's important that I don't put myself between the sound and the recording. So whether it's a distorted guitar or a big, beautiful, dreamy guitar or a thumping kick drum or crashing cymbals, my job is simply to record. So my only method and my only protocol is to record. I do the same exact thing in the studio for every single band, no matter what they're doing, every single time, and have for 40 years.
You set up the same drum kit, or you mic the drums the same way each
Well,
time?
I mean, certainly there has to be sometimes a little different, but mostly not. Because, look, a Shure 57 on a snare drum, we can all agree, it's going to work. Why do I need to be like, let's try different snare mics? That's not the time for that. The time for me is to just capture, because for the band, it's got to happen. They got to play it. And so my job is to be ready to capture it. I feel like the catcher in the rye. You know, you have to be ready to capture it. And then once it's captured, in its purest form, this is just what I do, in its purest form, then in the control room, it's my job to maximize what they just gave me. So for example, in Leg of Lamb, Josh came into the control room. He's like, I need something else for the bridge. I need something else for the bridge. Because we just done some backing vocals, which happened to be Dum Dum, You Idiot. Dum Dum, You Idiot. Dum Dum, You Idiot. And then he's like, okay, we're gonna have to do some big guitars in there now because the bridge has to change. We need something else. So they went and did whatever they were doing, 8 or something. And this was during a time when we didn't have plugins. And before plugins, what you would do is take guitar pedals and use step-down boxes from the patch bay to be able to use guitar pedals as effects like we use plugins now. And so you have like 12 to 15 guitar pedals, effect pedals actually right outside the patch bay. So I just took the Dum Dum, You Idiot, split it into 2 tracks because it was just one backing vocal track, and then distorted it crazy through guitar pedals until you can't really tell that what you're hearing is Dum Dum, You Idiot, Dum Dum, You Idiot, and printed that back to a track. And then when Josh came back in, I was like, hey man, instead of these big fuzzy guitars, check this out. Turned it up. I love it. You know, so the point is I took something that already existed, that was already there, and I maximized it in a creative way. So I used creative abandon at that point to leave a mark on the track. Not when I'm getting ready to track it or capture it. That just needs to be me out of the way, everything working, the band playing. Later, you will be given opportunities to maximize what you are given in the most creative and simple way possible without having to add a bunch more stuff. That's my goal, is to maximize in every opportunity that I have, and generally what I'm already given, either as an engineer or as a mixer, and to surprise the client with something that they already did, the backing vocals. It's already existed, but there has to be moments for my creative self to come forward with a gusto, bold-faced, and do something cool as hell, and then back away again. Because otherwise my ego and my personality starts to become too big in the room, and that's not my role. My role is to capture and maximize, and for me to survive in the studio. Now, other people might be able to take their big personalities and their big creativities that aren't the artist and wield them in ways, but that's not how I feel comfortable. But I'll come out and big with a big old cool something when I feel it really strongly, and then I will deliver that. And I've done that successfully. And I don't know, it's a way to maximize without loading on all kinds of unimportant shit to get one thing done, which is make the bridge a little bit bigger. What do I have? And I take that now into the mix. That essentially was basically part of the mix, because we mixed the record at the same time we tracked it directly after, song by song. Sure. Anyway, did that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
I love that.
Rad.
You had told me at one point that you serve nothing other than the song. You don't serve the artist. You don't serve the studio. You serve the song and are
Yes.
unapologetic about it. And I think that's such a pure way to approach.
If you're an engineer or a mixer or producer, whatever, I had to get to that, because otherwise I was being what felt to me like destroyed by egos. I'm married to a musician. I know, I mean, they have to have these massive egos, because how else are they going to get on stage, play, expose their music, expose their hearts to be either adulated or criticized and crucified for it, to get up there and exhaust themselves? They need these egos to bolster that. And I respect that so deeply, the ego of the artist. The other side of that, though, is a cudgel. that for the subordinates, of which I consider myself in the studio, subordinate to the song, not to them and their cudgels, but you're still exposed to it, and it can be painful, and it can be confusing, and it can be very, very hard to take year after year after decade. So I just at some point decided, I am not here for you. I am not here for your talent. I am not here for your ego. I am not here for your praise or for your criticisms. I am here to serve your song. And once I pointed myself at the song and decided I will serve only the song, everything else really started to fall into place, especially the egos, so that the angry guitar player who's wearing an oven mitt because their hand can't be allowed to get too cold, and I'm thinking you could get a heating pad, you could go wank it off. I mean, do we really have to walk around waving the mitt and talking about your hand all the time? You know, I had to find a way to block that. And so I can convene with this person by speaking to them through their song. I wouldn't even necessarily look at them. Hey, guitar, you need to come up a little bit. Are you okay? Are you warm enough? You know, I'm being sarcastic. I wasn't being rude. And that was a funny, weird guy. I would then take an artist who I felt like was spinning out in the control room. It was getting weird. We were losing them. And just really focus on their song and them in their song and talk to them in their song and their part in their song. Then you find them coming up closer and being like, yeah, you're right. Maybe I should just re-sing that. You know, and because they can see themselves then in their song instead of in their heart or in their mind or wherever the hell they are, standing next to you angry. And it really helped me. And then I started doing that 25 years ago, and now I can be in the room with a bunch of artists and not even know they're in there because I am there to serve their song. That's why they're paying me. They're not paying me to serve them. If they want somebody to pay them to serve their ego, they can find millions of some of them other people to do that, just not me. And it does keep me safe. So that is why it's not because I have some lofty idea that I'm like the Lorax to the songs. I have to keep myself safe and keep myself in a positive subordinate position, but also be able to dominate the room the minute that I need to, passively and with authority to control the room and keep the room flowing forward at all times, keep the mix flowing forward at all times. And so that is part of my secret protocol.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's talk mixes.
All right.
What makes a great mix for you? What's the we've talked about a lot of different songs and there's a common thread, but to you, what is it? When is it done for you? When's the mix finished?
It's just 1 second, please. When is it done? You know, I mix alone now, so I'm alone in that room, and I have narratives that carry out in my mind, which actually speak to a whole other part of my personality, which is a novel writer. Thank you. I write novels, and these narratives have nothing to do with the song or the intent of the song. But as I'm working on people's songs, I bring my narratives forward. The mix is often done when I'm done with that scene in my head, but the mix is really done for me when I can't answer that. I just know when, for me, every stone has been turned over and looked under. I know the drums and bass are smoking hot. I know that I've got the vocal in the most beautiful place that it could possibly be in. I know that every single instrument, I have actually listened to in solo to find every single amazing thing they did and turn just that up and the rest of it, turn that down, so that I have room for everything, so that at any moment, the very best that those artists played, when they go and listen, because artists actually secretly only listen to their part if it's a band, that I have highlighted enough of them so that they think, yeah, I really hear my fiddle all the time, when really you don't. You hear your greatest parts, and then the rest of you is actually quite low. I really ride. I don't use a lot of plugins. I don't mess around with a lot of, of the new school stuff. I really ride the hell out of tracks to this day. as if my fingers were on the faders, even though they're not. I don't have a console in my room. I have an analog backline, but I don't have a console, so I write them in my mind, but my hands are often like this. I don't know when it's done. It's done when I know that I'm satisfied, that it sounds fantastic to me, that it thrills me, that I listen to it and I'm like, oh, I can't wait for the favorite thing that I just did because I'm so cool comes by again. You know, I let my ego rip at that point. I'm like, oh shit, that thing I did at the guitar and the bridge is so cool. It's so cool. Here it comes. Oh God, that sounds good. I hope they notice. You know, I hope they even notice that I spent an hour on getting that balance just right. And then that moment comes and then we lead, you know, and then we all leap into the next chorus. It feels like we flew in there. And I get off on that stuff. And when I get myself off enough, I think, I'm done. Right? Sorry. It is not sexual. It is sensual. And anybody who can sit in this room and not understand, at least for me, music is sensual, and my relationship with the song is through my speakers. And so everything, it is truly sensual. I feel it in every part of my body. And that for me is as sensual as breastfeeding was. I feel it. That is not a sexual thing. It is a sensual thing. And any women here who have breastfed before know that there's a feeling that's like, whoa, crazy. This is crazy. This is a weird, crazy shit. There's something coming out of my boob, and it's nourishing this human being. And so that was intense, right? So when I feel that I've got a song, whether again it's in the tracking room or in the mix room, where I'm feeling that surge of tingle all over my body because the bridge has led into the last chorus in such a way that it leaves me breathless, I've succeeded. So that's what I mean, sensual. I feel it. I do feel it in my body.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. Thank you. I am breastfeeding my mixes. I have squirted breast milk on a Neve board before. Because when you take your baby off, you don't realize that it will sometimes go psh. You're like, wow. Did you know that? No. You'll find out. Sorry, it is true. And then my biggest thought was, oh shit, there's a lot of sugar in that. That's not good if it leaks down and gets in the circuitry. So I went and cleaned it off right away. It's not like water. It's like pouring a Coke in a board. So, sorry.
I know you're... We're going to go to gear. Segue. I know you're an extreme... you know, gear junkie, gear nerd, lover of consoles, lover of gear. In 2007, I believe, you moved from Nashville to your current home and you built a mix room.
Right.
And I want to touch into that a little bit. I think philosophically what it means to have your space in your mix room, what you think maybe is the differences from mixing in commercial rooms versus having your own private space. And then, you know, also gear, you know, what is your, you know, desert island stuff, you know, in your mix room? Maybe speak on that a little bit.
I'll give a very, very brief reason why there was a Nashville at all after I had been in New Orleans. And that was at a time when we all started to get Pro Tools at home. Everything was still, you know, you went into studios, you cut on analog, but we all had our little Pro Tools units and we were all trying to figure it out because we were all scared. All the analog engineers were like, what is that? And who's the, you know, person who comes up, and it was always a guy, on a trolley, and they're parked in the hall. What are they doing? Like our tracks, they're like, we're going to send it over to the Pro Tools guy, and it's going to come back different, and we're going to dump it back to tape, that track. And we're like, what is he doing out there in the hall with the Pro Tools cart? So everybody got Pro Tools. We're all teaching ourselves Pro Tools. Katrina hit. I lost everything that I owned, including all my little gear, which was very sweet. And it was not little, it was beautiful stuff, but it was all I had. That's okay. A lot of people lost everything in New Orleans and Katrina. And I'd also had a baby, so he was 5 months old. So my husband and I decided to move up to Nashville because we thought that was the right thing to do. So I was up there for about 5 years and landed there. And, you know, my career was enough well established that I could still book gigs and tracking gigs, go into to big rooms and mix, bring my baby with me. Squirt breast milk on the Neve board while John Rich is in the room and I thought he was going to throw up. I thought he was going to scream, but he didn't. Anyway, so did some work in Nashville. It was great. And but then the recession hit, and in 2007 and 2008, again, I don't know how many people remember, it hit engineers hard. It hit the music business hard. But those of us middle-class engineers, is what I consider myself, we were losing all our work. And so budgets were slashed. So it wasn't like, okay, look, we got $6,000, maybe $8,000 for you to mix this record. And yeah, we have another $10,000 to pay for the room. We don't. We have $5,000 and that's it for the whole mix. Well, a lot of engineers their careers ended, but I couldn't let mine. So I was like, all right, I got to set up at home. I'm going to have to start mixing at home, and I'm going to have to find a way to make this work because I want to keep doing this, and I want that $5,000. And since the mix is happening in my head, it's my creativity. It is not billions of dollars of gear. It's many thousands of dollars of gear. I'll give you that. $100,000 even now, but it is not a $300,000 console in a massive room. I don't need $5 million. I just need enough gear to be able to create at home on Pro Tools for people who got $5,000 but believe in me. And so I got an analog backline summing amp and a couple, API lunch boxes and filled them up with API EQs and, some other stuff that was available at the time, mostly API. Because Neve, and my Neves got wrecked in the flood, so I didn't have those, but I had some rack mount Neves and some good speakers, and I just, when they didn't have enough to pay for the room and me, I started mixing at home and I started making it work. And Chad Blake had been doing it for a few years in England, and he's my good friend, so he helped me understand, definitely get this, you're gonna need that. And Shakir King was doing it too. So there were people who were kind of setting up at home, weathering the recession, and I was one of those people. And I would still get into the room to mix and be thrilled to be back at East Ira, Studio B on the, SSL that I loved or wherever, and mixing there. So I had my little mix room at home, and I was cutting my teeth there. But then it was time to leave Nashville after a few years of that because the mortgage was too big, and it just wasn't working, and things were getting too hard. And I was feeling the pull of the nanny costing $18,000 a year. You don't want a cheap nanny. You don't, not like budget nanny. What teenager can I get to, I wanted a good nanny. And then the kid was walking around, my son, in the control room. He wasn't in the turtle shell anymore. He was moving around and he was touching knobs and he was crying and he was a toddler. So it wasn't working. So we had to split and we had to go somewhere. And I was missing the golf. Grayson was missing the golf. It was getting weird, and I was like, what? Nashville fucking hates me anyway. I don't really understand this. Apparently I use too much bass. I've been told I use too much bass. And, and so I did my best there. And not all of it, Nashville hated me, but a couple people didn't seem to like me. And I had lobbed a couple weird bombs at a couple weird people, and maybe they blacklisted me a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I squirted breast milk on the Neve board. So we decided to move back to the Gulf, to Mobile, Fairhope, where my husband's mom lived, and grandmommy was going to watch her son. And doing that, I was going to be able to build a mix room. That's what brings me to all of this. So I took some money and I built a very modest, very small, beautifully shaped and tuned all wood mix room, and invested in some more equipment and learned that room. And for me, the room is everything. Knowing my speakers is everything. That I would no more walk into that room right now over there as much as I love that console, and I'm actually now jonesing for it. I want to track on it, but I wouldn't dare mix on it. I couldn't mix in that room because I don't know that room. It would take me a week or two to even feel a little bit safe in that room. But in my room now, because I've been in there since 2010 when it got built, and my speakers are all placed and I've mixed so many records there that I can guarantee you, if it sounds good to me on my Genelec 8351Bs, and my, sorry, they just left my name. Sorry, other speakers, I'll apologize when I get home. Jesus Christ, because I never use them anymore because I got the Genelecs, but I'll remember in a minute. I know my room, and I know my truck, which is an old 2008 Ram with, literally, it actually has manual doors and windows. It's that old, but it's got a good stereo in it. And I don't deal in subwoofers. I don't play in that realm because guess what? If you get it right with just regular old bass, it sounds great in everybody's subwoofer stuff because it just does. Because guess what you can do with 40 hertz? Nothing. It either is or isn't. You can't filter it. If you filter it, it's gone. What are you going to do? Roll the 30 out of 40? Roll 40 down to 30? From 60 below, there's nothing but thumps. This, whoops, there's a mic bump. There's nothing but subs. And subs just exist as a single entity, which is they exist and they have to have a big enough speaker. So you don't have to worry about those. Just know that if you get your bass right above 6, everything's correct. Say, okay, I'll give you 55. 55 and above, it's going to resonate just fine in a subwoofer paradigm or world. And as long as you're not rolling it out there, because anytime I go in and I listen to my mixes in cars that have big subby things, they're fine. So don't use those to make any decision. Well, do what you want, certainly, but I don't. And if a studio has a subwoofer, I turn it off immediately. And unless the client needs to listen to it later, they can go listen to it by themselves. I will not play. I love them, but I just don't play in them. And that's always kept me safe in my room. I know what my bass is doing. I know what it's doing all the time. And I know what it's doing. So any mix that I didn't mix Queens of the Stone Age in my room, but now I can predict what the bass will do on these speakers, on those speakers, anywhere, because I know my room, and it's huge. And I need Neve, and I need API, and I need Great River, and I need some Harrison, and I need my Genelex, and I need I don't have the money to buy a console, but if I did, I'd buy a. Sorry, Neve, I love you. I'll be rack mounted. I'd buy an API because they're making really great new consoles. But I can't afford one, so I won't. I'm going to come here instead and play on your board, honey. Yeah. And that's the truth, too. I don't need all the gear because it turns out after all these years, I need what I have, and I need creativity to flow. And kind of the more stuff I get, the more that gets bogged down. If the best recordings that I've ever heard and the best mixes I've ever heard all took place, I'm going to not lie, mostly 90 and before, I don't need anything more than what I've got. I got 16 channels. That's my summing amp, and I've got beautiful EQs and all of those. So what I do is if you send me your billion-track session, I'm going to sub you down your backing vocals to 2 stereo tracks just like I would if we were on tape, and I'm going to put them through a couple APIs. I'm going to print them back into Pro Tools. And that's your backing vocals. Of course, your tracks are still there. If you're freaking out, I will be able to bring, but that never happens. I sub everybody's stuff down just like we're on 16-track tape. And it's all playlisted. Everything's still there. And then I use my imagination, and I do all kinds of crazy shit. But all of it seems to please people. I don't do stuff that's like, hey, look at what I did. Look, so that I can get some kind of, writer's credit? I want an arranger's fee because I'm so cool? No. I don't even tell them what I did. I never point out my successes. That's that moment when I was saying, oh my God, I'm getting off of myself right now because I did this and it's beautiful. I don't point out later, you won't believe what I did to thrill you in your bridge. They're just like, shit, the bridge sounds great. Yeah, you guys are amazing. And why take that from them and have that for myself? I'm getting paid. And I want them to just think, I don't know, whatever she did sounds great. And then they think it's them, that they're great. Because at that point, it needs to go back to them. It's out of my purview. They need to go off as their band and think, we are as great as this mix. We play this great, you don't. We sound this great, you don't. But that's my job, is to infer and make them believe that they really are that amazing. And that thrills me. So, thank you. Thanks.
Real quick.
Yes.
Mix bus.
I use the mix. You mean, what do I use?
I want to know, so in a world of folks sending mixes out that are the equivalent to mastered level mixes,
Right.
Versus the era when you learned how to make records, it's a much softer mix. It's a VU mix. It's an analog mix.
Right.
There's a trend happening in modern music of just brick walling mixes. What is
I'm
your
not in that trend.
what's your opinion? And is it, how much do you lean in mix buses? Do you send out an L2 for reference? Do you not?
Well, it depends on the art the client at that point. Like with my relationship with Shooter, I do use a very very light limiting, which is interestingly just the old limiter in my mix stream summing amp, but it's amazing and it's not new. And now they're old and hard to find, and they don't make them anymore, and they're beautiful. Very lightly, I use very little mix bus because. I leave that to the mastering engineer. I really rather they did it. I can hit that hard if I want to, but I never hit it too hard.
Yeah.
I have always, my mixes are generally much quieter than, of course, master mixes. So for Shooter, he does not want me to hear L2'd just to bring it up to listening level. He gets it. He knows what he's hearing. So I send him the mix at my natural print level. And Pete turns it up. Pete masters all his stuff. Other artists, I understand that I have to make them understand what it's going to sound like once it's mastered. So for those, yes, I will put on a plugin. I will embed a plugin. I'll just render it in. I don't run my mix through the plugins and then print it. It comes out of my mix stream natural, and then I'll embed gain. And I let them know this is gained up in faux mastering just so that it sounds really fucking loud, so they don't get scared when they play it. They're not like, why is this so quiet? I forgot how to turn up a volume knob. I used to be kind of bitchy about that, like just turn up your knob, but people don't get it. They're listening in their headphones to things that are mastered, and it's disappointing then when their mix is 8 dB quieter. So it's just easier just to turn it up for them, send it in. But then I usually, if I hit my mix bus pretty hard, I'll usually send Pete, who's the main mastering guy I use, kind of the hard hit. And then I'll usually turn down my whole mix and send him one that's not hitting the mix bus quite so hard, so he can choose which one he wants to put in the sequence depending on what serves the sequence.
Yeah, that's do you Pete Lyman is who you're speaking of, who does your mastering. Do you like having a relationship? Do you try to stay? If I come to Trina and I want a mix done, are you saying I want it to go to Pete?
Well, there's a lot of mastering engineers that are great, and I've used so many over the years, but it seems like Pete is somebody. Now, Pete is not an inexpensive mastering engineer, and a lot of people that I work for simply can't afford Pete, and so they're not going to get mastered by Pete. Pete knows my mixes intimately, so he knows exactly what to expect, and it's almost like Pete masters everything that Shooter produces that I mix, and I mix most of what Shooter produces, and David Sprang records most of it, so we have this kind of tried and true situation going on, and Pete knows what to expect, and I know what to expect from David and Shooter, and it's just, we just got done with Turnpike Troubadours literally 48 hours ago, and it's just a very symbiotic relationship. So in that case, yeah, it's always Pete, because it's all almost mix, known in advance. But if it's not, there are a lot of really great even I will master sometimes. I'm not good at it, but I'm good enough. But I'll tell you what, I turn in mixes that don't need much. I make sure they're all leveled. I make sure there's not, this one's quieter, this one's louder. I do all of that in advance. I mean, I listen very, very hard and long at the mixes that I'm turning in as the body of work, song by song. So Shooter already knows, or whoever, I've already got it pretty much pre-mastered. So in general, the mastering engineer doesn't have to do anything but turn it up those extra 4 to 6 dB that it's going to need to be to compete with whoever this artist has to compete with.
Yeah. So if I want to send files to Trina Shoemaker to have a song mixed, what do you want those files to look like? If I'm tracking, working with a band and I have plugins all over it, do you want those plugins?
No.
Do you want me to zero out those sessions?
I don't even want your session. All I want is your face audio consolidated and uploaded in a folder. Because I have my own whole session set up. So I'm not, if you sent me your sessions, I would still go to your session,
audio.
Export just the audio. Now, it's not bad to have some playlists, because later you might need to say to me, hey, look, I do need you to fix this. It's on the playlist for the guitar. So I will accept people's sessions. And you don't even bother, you have to turn your plugins off. I'm not going to use any of them. I'm not going to look at what you did at all. I do want the rough mix, because I want to know where you left off, so I know emotionally where your artist was and where you were. Not to copy anything, but just to know where you were. And then I'm going to swipe and consolidate and export that audio and import it into my sessions.
So you have a template built.
Oh,
ultimately.
yeah. I have a very big template. I have a template that has almost 80 tracks in it.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to say, oh, this one has the doubled accordion. Here we are. And then I could pull the audio out from the audio file bin and just fill in. Again, 80 by meaning there's harmonica, harmonica room, you know, violin, violin two, string sections, so that I'm ready to pull in whatever audio anybody's going to send me without having to lazily open new tracks.
Yeah.
You know, and then I, close down what I don't use. But yeah, I have a template.
I want to get to a point where we can open up and have some questions asked, but I want to ask real quick, Atmos.
Okay, so Atmos is like this. I don't listen to it because I don't have the bandwidth. Mainly because, one, I don't have Atmos headphones and I'm not going to buy them. I like my Apple AirPods that I have. Atmos, I feel, is wonderful if you are a person that either was born in the 2000s. I don't know. It's fine, but I'm a stereo person. You know, I'm like, there's left, there's right, there's middle, and there's everything in between. I already have emotional problems that to have things turning up inside my head in places that I don't want music coming in will only actually make me probably hyperventilate and think that's out of phase. Oh God, this mix is out of phase. No, they put that there. So I have no use for Atmos. I don't have a brain that I can't even do TikTok because I'm like, this is going too fast. I don't care. Who are you people? Oh my God, I'm scared. Boom, and shut down. So Atmos will just frighten me. But I have decided that I've been approached recently by many labels because Apple and their Atmos, and those are the mixes that they put up front. They don't put the natural mix. So I laid my foot down with, actually Charlie Crockett's record is when I started it, the new one, with Island Records. And they said, we want all your stems. And by the way, I do not release my mix sessions to labels under any circumstance. That is my intellectual property. You purchased from me a finished mix. And variations on that mix, how I got it there and what I do, that belongs to me. That's all I have. Those are my secrets. Now, I will also provide fully stemmed out, the stems. Plus, you can't recreate my mix with just my sessions, because what about the analog backlog? What are you going to do there? You don't have my gear. So I will send stems, but I charge for those, the same rate, $130 an hour, to stem out the mix. And then you have a representation of my exact mix that you can play anywhere. But Atmos, then they're like, we want you to send all your stems to this Atmos mixer so they can put it in the Atmos protocol, which just means placing it, then they get the mix credit. And I was like, hang on, I'm not a credit hog, but that's my mix still, even though it's placed around your head in a crazy 64 locations, that's my work. So I said that I would not release the stems. Luckily for Charlie, I'd already been paid by Charlie directly before he signed with Island, so they couldn't hold over my head that we won't pay you. And so I said, and I want credit. Then I wrote to Shooter, I'm like, they want the stems for the Atmos. He's like, God damn it, I hate Atmos. And then Shooter jumped in, and I was like, and why aren't you talking to the producer anyway? This is a little weird. Make it round robin. We set up a protocol, which is basically if my stems are used for whatever label wants it, for anybody, I simply share the credit with the Atmos mixer. Original mix, Trina Shoemaker, Atmos mix by XYZ. And that way, everybody gets the credit where credit is due. And that's how I'm handling Atmos, in case anybody cares. Thank you. Working out.
Trina, you're a legend.
So are you. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? When's the movie coming out?
Yes. You raised your hand.
I did.
Hi.
The English Jamaican version you recorded with, that wouldn't happen to be Steel Pulse.
No, not at all. The artist's name was Hugh Harris.
Okay.
His work is available. He did pass away, and it was very, very sad. Hugh Harris, absolutely beautiful. You can Google the song "Rhythm of Life," and that is something that will. I mean, it's a bit dated now because it did happen in the '80s, but wow, wait till you hear him sing. And then he died. But he helped me more than any human being ever helped me. And the next person who helped me was a guy named Daryl Johnson, who played bass with Dan Lanois for years and years and years, because he's the person who came up to me at Kingsway while I was singing along with who knows what. I was just cleaning up and printing, roughs, and I'm singing in harmony to something. And he's like, hey, girl, you sing good. You do them harmonies good. And he's a brilliant backing vocalist. And I was shy and shut down. And he's like, no, no, no. And he taught me the thirds and the fifths, and he actually taught me how to do harmonies. He didn't need to do that. He didn't need to sit me down and do that. So, and he did. And after that, people started having me sing on their records. And I don't do that a lot because I actually hate it. But I want to record the backing vocals and control them. But if necessary, I'll do one. But yeah, so those two men were so instrumental in helping me believe in myself in the studio. One of them went on to become a junkie, and the other one died. But that's okay. They were geniuses.
In what ways has mixing changed when it comes to the streaming listener landscape?
I don't know, because I don't know what the streaming listener landscape is. I'm serious.
So like all these different kinds of headphones. So like you're having somebody straight up play it off of their phone.
Right.
The speakers just straight off the phone.
Yeah.
Somebody going, oh, well, I'm going to use headphones. Okay, I'm going to use Apple, pods. Like, do you think that there has been a change or a lostness to what we just heard right now? Like you're hearing it on two different sides.
Well, my answer to that is in terms of my, protocol, nothing has changed. I still mix on the same speakers. I do check in my headphones, which are not little Apple Pods. They're Bang & Olufsen. They were $800. They're amazing headphones, but they're not like Spatial Weirdo headphones. They're just regular old headphones. I go listen in my regular old Ram 2008 truck with no subwoofers. And if it sounds great to me in those three spots, and then I turn it in, whatever's happening to the listener in ear, and I listen on my, I think everything sounds great in earbuds. Everything. You can have the shittiest mix in the world and it sounds amazing because it's in your head. It's actually it's in your brain. So, but what's happening with listeners out there with the myriad headphone experiences, I don't know. I hope my stuff still sounds good, but I have no idea. And I'm not pushing this off to the side. I really don't know. Will you listen to some of my mixes and let me know? But I can't mix for them because I can only mix for what I know. And so far I'm still getting gigs, so it must be translating to the streaming, the streaming environment.
Tim.
No. There's no navigation. I simply set my rate at what I value my life as for an hour of my life, because that's all I have left. Again, I'm 60. I only got about 20 years left, let's face it. Really, 80 is going to be kind of old to still be doing this. So right now, I'd like to value it at $300 an hour, but I won't get anything. So I value it at $130 an hour. So whoever you are, whether you are the richest rock star in the world or somebody who's really struggling, I'm still $130 an hour. Now, okay, I will say that if Taylor Swift rolled in, I'd be $130 an hour plus 4 points. In other words, I'm not a moron. I'm not going to say, hey, I know that you have massive amounts of money and I want some of that, because I went through my years where I didn't ask, and guess what? I didn't get anything. And I regret that now. But so I will always keep my rate what I think is a fair, what I deserve for an hour of my attention, and then I'll play points if I think that you would recoup and I could possibly, and if I produce, I always, of course, ask for points, but none of those records ever really recoup, sadly.
When you're mixing a song, is it based on a certain amount of hours, or is it I'm $130 an hour and it's going to take as long as it's going to take?
Well, I usually let people know when they approach me that, look, I can't give you any kind of set estimate because I haven't seen your tracks. I don't know what your recording versus your desired outcome really is. You might send me a track where you're like, we want big live sounding drums, yet you recorded your drums in quite a small room. Now, that doesn't mean I can't make your drums sound like they were recorded in a big room. It won't be as cool as if you had, but that's going to be more hours. I don't know if you have a good recording or a bad recording. I don't know if your production is cohesive and meaningful or if it's scatterbrained. I don't know if your actual sonics are quality. So let me open that first song and I'm going to mix from my heart with no constraint on my time. And if it took me 12 hours to get the song where I feel that it sounds as good as I can possibly get it, then we're all going to know, guess what? This took me 12 hours to get it where I feel like I can deliver it to you, or it took me 6. Or, but if they say we only have enough for 6 hours, then I will say, then I'm not your mixer. But you might find out later that it only took me 6 hours. I will not have my hands tied in advance by anybody. After all these years, I've had my hands tied. I don't want them tied. If you want me to mix, send me your tracks. I'll do an assessment. I'll do a mix. It'll take me X amount of time. After that, you'll know we can't afford her. To get the song where we're thrilled now took her 14 hours. That's how shitty your recording is. Or how you didn't know what you wanted to sound like, and I had to find it for you, and it took time. And I'm not going to pay for that with my time. I'm not going to say I'll mix your song for $1,000 and spend 18 hours on it. I'm also not going to say I'm $2,500 a song and spend 6 on it, because then I'm robbing somebody. And even if it's a label, I don't want to rob labels either. I want to be paid what I'm worth. And if you have enough money to help me get my son through college, I'm going to ask for some points so that I can start to stock my retirement at this point. But otherwise, I just want to be fair. I don't want to play in the rich, I'm going to get as much money as I can, because that's happened to a lot of people, and I watch them die. So I just want to stay safe and do the best I can and be paid what I'm worth, that I believe I'm worth.
Wow.
That's what I got.
Well, it's a first the speaking Harley Croc W to text.
Yes, it is. Yay, Charlie.
Yeah, that also and on the gallery, the government team that you try to step to in terms of what hours of work, how much you have out there. Is there something that you maintain that you
Well, sort of. Again, since I mix at home and now my son's in college, so and my husband and I have reverted back to living like teenagers, sleep in. I do have to work at a horse barn 3 days a week from 10:30 till about 1:30 because I have to pay off the board for the 2 horses that I rescued. So I work around my horse chores. Otherwise, now I keep a very weird schedule. I'll roll into the studio again because I'm hourly, so I log in and I keep very close hours. So I might work for 3 hours and then stop, go to the grocery store, run something out to the barn, come back, and then find myself in that special place where I just want to, where I'm just absolutely transfixed by the mix. Then I'll find that I worked till 1 a.m, and then I log myself out, and then I go to bed, and it's kind of a 24-hour cycle because I can. But if I'm being hired to track and I'm on location, then I like to start at 10:30 in the morning, and I like to be allowed to work until I drop, because I'm not going to do anything else. It's not like I want to go hang out in the town. I don't even want food because food gives me a stomachache. I just want snacks brought into the control room, and I never leave that seat, because if I leave that seat, the whole thing stops, because I'm producer and engineer, because I'll only engineer if I'm producing, except for rare exceptions. So if I leave the room, the session stops. So why not just stay and work nonstop?
how much back you drink stones even are you?
I'm about to do a lot more because now, again, that my son has left for college, I'm free to go away for, a month if I need to. It was different when he was in school. I was a working mom. I needed to be there. So now I want to get back. I will start accepting more production jobs that include tracking. I just did Rodney Crowell this summer, which is fantastic. So, but I didn't produce. Tyler produced. But that one I agreed to record and mix and not produce because Rodney is a dear old friend. And I love that little young gun, Tyler Bryant. And I just wanted to get around him and be like, play for me, son. And he is incredible. So, and we've become friends. So, but yeah, I'd love to do a lot more production and tracking now because it's fun. I want to do it in there.
One more question. Right here.
Do you carry
Yeah.
I would love to, but I do not have one because I seriously don't. It all comes down to how the musician holds the guitar and slouches or leans back or is a move aroundy guy who's like, okay, I've got the mics placed. And then they're like this. And, in other words, that is so different. But I will say, I will often use 2 mics, not a lot though. And it depends on, is there a vocal mic involved? If there's a vocal mic involved, I'm only going to use 1 mic on the guitar because what it really matters is not the position, it's the phase relationship. So everything comes down to, if you're going to have two mics on that guitar, whether you have one here, up on the frets, or here, or here, or here, however you're going to place them, that they are perfectly in phase. And that position is going to depend not only on the part they're playing, the guitar they're playing, how they play it, how they move their body. But I can tell you, I go in and out of the control room about 10 times checking phase until I'm finally like, can you please remember how you are sitting right now? Because we have perfect phase relationship, and then it will shift. So you just make sure that when you listen to one, you think that sounds good on its own, and you listen to the other and think that sounds good on its own, so that if you were to not use one or the other, they could both stand alone as a functional acoustic guitar mic. And then when you put them on together, you're suddenly like, oh, yeah, hooray. And you will often fail. Acoustic guitar is one of the hardest things to record, in my opinion.
Yes.
So hard. And if there's a vocal involved, oh, so hard. And you'll only get lucky, and sometimes you'll score, and sometimes it'll be just tragic. So don't get your hopes up to ace that. There is no acing that. Or maybe there is, but I don't know what it is. Do you know?
I don't know, but hey, so what is that mic that you're trying to get in phase?
I love a KM. I love an original KM84, not a 184.
Yeah.
A good old-fashioned Neumann KM84. I like small condenser microphones on acoustic guitars. Occasionally, though, I'd like just a big old U47. It depends on the part. You know, it really does. And I will try both. I do want the acoustic to sound great. And so I'll experiment a little, but a KM84 rarely will let you down, nor will a beautiful U87 place just right for the right song. Are they strummy, and sloppy? Or is this all arpeggio? And then but what I really like, once I'm in the studio, sorry, the light's really blinding. I'm glad I'm not a rock star, because this would kill me. I would not survive. A chain that has a high quality microphone going through a high quality preamp and a high quality compressor that works, it is not having any problems, is the best microphone for everything. So if they grab the acoustic guitar and they're like, hey, let me lay down an acoustic, I'm going to run over with that chain, that 47 that's going through that Neve, that's going through that LA2A or whatever it is, because it sounds great and it's all working, and we're right over there on his wheelie stand and shove it in front of that acoustic because that chain works. So mostly I want a bunch of working microphone chains that I can move around the studio anywhere I want at any moment and keep it real fluid like that. Like, other than the drum mics, and I might steal their overheads or their room mics if I need them, I'll use whatever is close as works in a fast-paced session. You're welcome. Yes.
He's done really out of me. So on base.
Jacob's wedge. Jacob's ladder, man.
Yeah. I'm not the only one that got sweet. Yeah. Easily. He got it. What is it?
Exact same thing. I'm $130 an hour if I'm tracking or if I'm producing. But if I'm producing, obviously I'm producing that. I'm the producer and engineer. So in that case, I'm still $130 an hour, but I get points. That's how, for a producer, that's what I consider my pay for the producer. I'm a royalty participant, but I'm still $130 an hour. But for tracking, I will set a limit of 10 hours, but I'll still work 14 hours.
And how's that for you? So, it's time.
Then as a producer, I know that I'm never going to recoup or get any producer points, but I'll probably still do it because I need to just generate the income. Because still, $1,300 a day is still very good money in my world. It's huge. So I'd still make enough to, really, make my life work. And then I'd know that you were going to give me points on the record, but they weren't really ever going to be points because they were never going to be able to, because you couldn't account to me because you don't have a label that can account to me. I will also reduce my rate for points, but that's only for people that have a label that can account to me so that I know that I have royalty accounting and I can see that I'm possibly going to get paid.
I thank you so much for coming. Arlyn loves you. Austin loves you.
Thank you. I love
The
you.
Grammys love you.
Thank you.
As I said, I think you're a complete legend. I think the records you've made have been like the sound of definitely my life.
I've listened to your music for so long, and the records and your imprint on those records. And I will be the first one to say that I think Nashville made the wrong decision when they let you
They
leave.
gave me my walking
And
papers.
I think Tanya Tucker and the 2020 Grammys would agree with
Wow,
that
Thank
comment.
you. So kind. I'm gonna put this up to that one too.